Hi, and welcome to the Joyous Health Podcast, hosted by me, Joy McCarthy, and my hubs and business partner, Walker Jordan.
On our show, you'll be invited to learn about nutrition, well-being, beauty, family, and business.
All the things that we're deeply curious and passionate about.
We love to chat and have a few good laughs.
And our goal is to bring a dose of joy to your day. Hello there, and welcome back to this wonderful episode. You're about to hear Dr. Elaine Vora, and she is a holistic psychiatrist. Yes, you heard that right. She also practices acupuncture, and she is a yoga teacher. She takes a functional medicine approach to mental health, considering the whole person and addressing the imbalances at the root. And what we really get into today is talking about anxiety and mental health. And I really love her philosophy and how she uses so many different tools as a psychiatrist to work with her patients and help them truly heal. You know, it's not about just getting rid of their symptoms, but really getting to the root of it and treating them holistically, which I so appreciate because, it's looking at the whole person and the lifestyle factors that contribute to their anxiety. So we get into talking about what is true anxiety versus what is false anxiety. And a lot of us, I had actually never heard of this term false anxiety before, but a lot of us suffer from false anxiety. And the good news is those are things that are relatively easy to correct once we know what they are. So she gives great recommendations from a lifestyle perspective, things that you can do to mitigate anxiety. She also talks about the importance of nutrition and gut health. As well, we talk towards the end about parenting because it just so happens we have something in common. We both have 6-year-old daughters. So I asked her a personal question about what I have experienced with anxiety since being a parent. But whether you're a parent or not, I really think that you are going to love this episode because Ellen is going to give you some great tools. She's super smart. She has such a calming energy. And just a little bit more about her, she received her BA from Yale University and her MD from Columbia University, and she is board certified in psychiatry and integrative holistic medicine. And most importantly, definitely check out her book. So she is the author of the new bestseller, The Anatomy of Anxiety, and definitely go check it out. It will be in the show notes. There'll be a link, and it's worth checking out if you do suffer from anxiety or you know someone who does, because then you'll be able to help them. So here is my chat with Dr. Vora. So welcome to the podcast, Ellen. I'm thrilled to have you here. How are you doing?
Oh, thank you, Joy. I'm doing well. I'm really happy to be here and to have this conversation with you.
Amazing. So let's just jump right in. So you have an MD from Columbia and you're board certified in psychiatry. So what made you decide to take the next step to focus on integrative holistic medicine?
I am definitely a cliche and in good company with most people who sort of jump ship from the allopathic world and find themselves with a more holistic approach. Like everyone else, it had to do with my own physical health and finding, coming right up against the fact that the very thing that I was being trained to do, I was seeking help in the offices of conventional physicians, and it was not meeting my needs. And in many ways, it was just making matters worse. And so I had a very inefficient journey of seeking out other approaches to health and healing. And that's where I found a path to getting better. And once you've had that felt experience in your own body, you really can't go back. And so I knew that I had to practice in a way that was in alignment with what I experienced as helpful in my own body. And that's what got me on the holistic path.
So you were dealing with anxiety yourself, and what did that look like? And how long, was this as a teenager? How long were you dealing with this, and what did anxiety look like for you?
Anxiety was not actually even my most prominent symptom. It was in there in the sort of mix of everything else, but I was feeling a lot of depression and like low grade mood, what I would have called dysthymia or sort of chronic low grade mood. And then a whole host of other ways that my body was just falling apart. I had migraines and something called ocular migraines where your vision changes. acne, irregular periods, joint pain. I had rashes. I couldn't poop to save my life. I was really falling apart at the seams. And I was in medical school. I was thinking, I know how to do things quote unquote right. Like I know how to eat right and exercise and take care of myself. So why is my body broken? And it also was really striking that I had polycystic ovary syndrome. I wouldn't
Mhm.
get a regular period. And when I would go to my gynecologist, she would say, you're going to have trouble with fertility. So once you're ready to conceive, come back and talk to me about that. We can do metformin, we can do IVF. And I remember just scratching my head and thinking, this doesn't make sense because I'm the product of what, like 500 generations of successful reproduction. Why did it stop with me? What's going on? And it helped me recognize that the ways that we struggle are not entirely genetic because our genes have not all changed in the last generation. It's largely environmental. And so I realized that's an angle where I have some control. There's something I can do about this.
So, was a big part of all of your symptoms, did a lot of that have to do with stress being in medical school?
Stress is absolutely a piece. And that's kind of a central way that I think about mental health is it's always both. It's always a little bit of stress, a little bit of what's psychospiritually out of alignment in our lives, and there's a physical basis. And at least for me in medical school, the stress piece was not the easiest to change. It was a
Mhm.
stressful time in life. There was no way around
For
that.
sure.
I did find that yoga was really helpful. But the part that I could change were the sort of physical inputs that I was giving to my body. And even just by changing those, while I couldn't fully repair the stress, that made a huge difference in whether or not I could get through the day and feel well and have a stable, calm, happy mood. And so um, that's where I often focus first with my patients before we can actually overhaul whether or not their lives are stressful.
So, have you kind of transformed from when you had all those symptoms? Are you kind of past all that
Yeah,
and have
it's
healed?
it's really nice to be able to say that. I mean, I'm grateful for it absolutely every day. But I'm probably at this point more than 10 years out of feeling like I've gotten to a place where my body is in good shape, where things function and I feel good.
That's amazing. And we were just chatting before we started recording, and you have a 6-year-old. We both have a 6-year-old daughter. So obviously you have children, which is wonderful. So congratulations on that. And I want to talk about that in a little bit because I'm also curious how, being a mom and having a 6-year-old, if you've noticed any like anxiety in your child, and how is that different than when you're working with an adult? But we'll save that for a little bit. We'll come back to
Mm.
that. So I also want to, first of all, I just want to acknowledge you and say how grateful I am for what you do and all the information that you share. And I love, what you share on Instagram as well. Just before we went on to chat, I shared something with my community because I just love how you're truly an integrative practitioner and you take the best of all the worlds, and provide that knowledge to other people. So thank you so much for doing that. And I think it's really interesting as well that you're also an acupuncturist and a yoga teacher. And how does that influence the way you treat anxiety when you're working with your patients?
So much. Yeah. I mean, I think that I knew when I was training, when I was in medical school and residency, that it wasn't enough. Like there were ways that that was helpful for patients. I think a less comfortable conversation is the ways that that was potentially even harmful for some of my patients. But I knew it wasn't adequate. My patients weren't walking out of my office thriving or feeling fulfilled in their lives. They were getting elegantly medicated and a little bit therapized. And so I knew I needed more tools. And that's what drove me to go study Chinese medicine and acupuncture and a little bit of Ayurveda. And I became a yoga teacher and studied nutrition and functional medicine and psychedelic medicine for mental health. And all of that informs every single thing I do with patients. And it's almost at this point hard for me to even separate what hat I'm wearing in any given moment. But when I see someone, I see them through these multiple lenses. Someone walks into my office and I'm trying to it's almost like a different layer of vision. I'm trying to understand from an Ayurvedic perspective, what are their doshas? How are they out of balance? from a yoga perspective, even just hinging on yoga philosophy, sort of where have they gone astray from things like non-harming or truthfulness and how that has an impact on
Mm.
our mental health. And I'm always just thinking through all these different lenses. There's a human being in front of me and they're suffering right now in their life. They're out of balance in some ways, some of them physical, some of them psychospiritual. And how do we course correct? How do we nudge their overall, the whole organism back into a state of balance?
What I'm kind of hearing from you, and I haven't been a patient of yours, so I can't say, but what I'm kind of hearing is that I am guessing that your patients, when they see you, feel heard. Is that something you hear your patients say to you?
I think that that is the most profound gift any of us can give to anybody else. So it's certainly number one value that I bring to my practice. It's a priority. I hope they do feel heard. I'm sure there are times that they don't. Um, I'm sure there are times in me nodding vigorously and being like, I totally get what you're saying, conveying that with my body language. They're actually thinking, no, 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 you're actually missing what I'm saying. But it's certainly something I try to do. And I think for many of us, we've gone through our lives not fully feeling heard or seen or witnessed, feeling misunderstood. I think that this
Hmm.
is especially true for women as they navigate the healthcare world. I have many times gone into an office and felt condescended to, felt
Hmm.
dismissed. I sort of picked up on the bullying or the misogyny or the manipulation. And so I'm always trying to kind of heal my own past traumas by giving to someone else what I needed when I was struggling. And so I'm certainly trying to let my patients feel really heard and really understood.
That's amazing. We so need more people like you. It just made me kind of think something I totally forgot about. But I remember when I was like 18 or 19, I went to my family doctor and I was just kind of feeling kind of in a down mood a lot. And I know now looking back, I was in a relationship that I was really unhappy. And I wasn't able to acknowledge that probably because I was too afraid to admit that. And I stayed in that relationship like another 5 or 6 years. But he's like, okay, I'm going to send you to a psychiatrist. And it was probably within the first 10 minutes that the psychiatrist said to me, if you would like, I don't remember which antidepressant it was, but he said, I can just write you a prescription for, whatever the antidepressant was and like send you on your way. And even back then, I was like, I've just never, I just grew up in a household where we just never really used many medications. So, I said no very politely and just never went back. But this was obviously in the 90s, the late 90s, and I was just so surprised. And then, years later, I turned my life upside down and I've never been happier. Yeah, it still happens to many, many people. And I'm curious in your own practice, as you were saying, the different modalities that you use with your patients, how much does intuition come into play in what you do?
Hugely. And that was such a journey for me to be able to embrace that. I have a sort of vague memory of what it felt like in my childhood. And I think I did have access to my intuition, but I quickly instinctively silenced it. I kind of picked up on the fact that we live in this world that values the masculine, the rational, the objective. And I wanted to be accepted. I wanted to be accepted in the boys' club and to be thought of as smart and rational and reasonable and chill. And so I always really silenced that part of myself. And I didn't even have a relationship to it. And then it wasn't until I think I was in my 30s when I was doing my yoga teacher training in Bali. And there was a woman there named Daniela, and she had a big influence on my relationship to my own intuition. And she called herself a witch,
Oh, I love
and
that.
and she did energy work, and she was a yoga teacher, and she was just really such a magical being. And I looked up to her so much. And she showed me a model, someone I could admire who was very much in a healthy dynamic with her intuition. It wasn't like she had thrown away objective reasoning. That's there too, but she held it in balance with her intuition. So once I saw that model, I was able to embrace that in my own life. In my practice, thank God I am now in touch with my intuition Because I think about if I was only operating from a cerebral, intellectual place of here's what I've been taught and here's what, I'm supposed to do with this constellation of symptoms, I think I would be missing the mark so often with my patients. And I think often even sending them down a path that's unhelpful. And intuition has saved me in my practice so many times where I have that little nudge, that little inkling, a little something crawling on the back of my neck, or just some download that says, like, it's not that, it's this. And it's a compass that I use in my practice. And I find that it's in many ways a more useful compass than 10 years of med school and residency. It gets me more to the heart of the matter more quickly.
So, how can people, I think intuition is such a powerful tool in our daily lives. And really, I think it's about people just putting more trust into it. Do you have any thoughts or recommendations for any listeners who are really finding it challenging tapping into their intuition? Do you think it is just trust, or what are your thoughts on that?
On some level, it requires a societal shift where we value intuition and we value these more like less objectively measurable aspects of the human capacity to know things. And so I think we do need that societal shift to help us trust our intuition. But on an
Mhm.
individual level, it's a practice. You just cultivate it. I think of it as like we have this hotline to our intuition. And for many of us, it's atrophied, it's dusty. We're just not opening up that call. And so for me, it was a practice of slowing down, getting still, and listening. And when you listen, a lot of things bubble up. And so you have to discern the difference between future tripping and fear thoughts and then dwelling on the past. And those are not the same as intuition. Intuition has this much different quality or texture in my experience. It's somewhat calming, even when it's an inconvenient truth. It feels very
Mhm.
grounded in the body, and it feels to me like it comes from a place of love, even when it's saying, you have to blow up your life and do this really inconvenient thing. And I think it's a matter of discerning and then trusting that. And that's just, I find you learn to trust your intuition when you hear it, act on it, see that it led you in the right direction. And you just keep that cycle going and you increasingly come to trust it.
Yeah, and I really I agree with all of that. Thank you for sharing that. And I also just feel, yeah, the more you tap into it, the more available it is to you. And you're able, like you said, to discern, okay, is this, just a worry from the past or a worry about the future, or is this it? Like, is this my gut, leading me in the right direction? And now for a short break. I've been a tea drinker since I was a teenager, and I am proud to say I've converted many coffee lovers into enthusiastic tea lovers too. And yes, you can be both, a coffee lover and a tea lover. I love the calming ritual of taking a mindful moment to infuse some organic herbs into a nourishing cup of goodness, then slowly sipping up all the amazing health benefits from the blend of ingredients that make up a perfectly balanced cup of herbal tea. It's truly joyous. This deep love of tea and health habits that improve our well-being inspired me to collaborate with a local tea artisan to create a unique blend of wellness teas for you, my Joyous Health community. I wanted to focus on pure, natural, organic herbs and spices to let Mother Nature shine. So when you open a bag of our tea, what you see is exactly what you get. There's no hidden ingredients, flavors, additives, or chemicals. Only a blend of 100% organic ingredients that benefit your wellness and are absolutely delicious. We've carefully selected each ingredient for both its natural flavor and health benefits, and each tea is locally handcrafted right here in Toronto, Canada. So whether you're looking to reduce stress, manage inflammation, ease digestion, support your skin, unwind at the end of the day, or balance your blood sugar, I have the perfect tea for you. Right now, we have 5 unique organic herbal teas in our shop. So let's take a moment to meet 2 of our stars. I love starting my day with a cup of Rise and Shine tea. It's uplifting and grounding, caffeine-free, and it's made from a delicious blend of organic ingredients including turmeric, ginger, cardamom, cinnamon, and tulsi to help you start your day joyously. A mug of this special tea literally warms you up from the inside out. Our Rise and Shine tea is formulated with a Tulsi tea base. Now, this flavorful herb is a potent adaptogen. That means it helps the body cope with stress and anxiety, and it literally can increase your body's natural resilience. One of my favorite spices, turmeric, is most well known for its anti-inflammatory properties and also helps stimulate phase 2 liver detox pathways. If you happen to experience a stomach ache or nausea, the ginger in this tea can help to provide natural relief. You'll enjoy making a tea latte too with the Rise and Shine. It's so good on early mornings. It's such a nice way to awaken your body and boost your health for the day or before going to bed as a mindful ritual to wind down for deep and healing rest. Even though the name is Rise and Shine, it's safe to drink at night because, as I mentioned, it doesn't have any caffeine. Next, I love taking a mid-afternoon pause with a cup of our Joyous Rejuvenate tea. This tea is a refreshing and rejuvenating herbal blend of anti-inflammatory and detoxifying ingredients that will leave you feeling uplifted, rejuvenated, and joyous. Green rooibos is the main ingredient and is very high in an antioxidant called aspartame, which has been shown in animal studies to improve blood sugar balance. Lemongrass is excellent for digestion, and it's also a natural antimicrobial. Ginger is a potent anti-inflammatory for the whole body that also supports a healthy digestion. The best part of this tea is that the combination of flavors makes for a bright and refreshing drink that is super delicious, hot or chilled. In the summer, I love making a jug of the Joyous Rejuvenate tea and I just leave it in the fridge so I have it chilled. It's the perfect way to cool down, support your whole body health with every sip, and it's also really nice to have if you are entertaining because it is a total crowd pleaser. To check out all of our teas, visit shopjoyoushealth/herbal-tea. You can even enjoy 10% off your next tea purchase by entering JHPTEA, JHPT obviously, when you check out. So JHPTEA for 10% off. And now back to our guest. So we're going to shift focus a little bit, and I wanted to talk about a concept that you write about called false anxiety. And if you could share what you mean by this term and how this false anxiety is created in the body and how do most people tend to experience it?
Yeah, I mean, in many ways, this is the thing I'm most excited about in this moment as we're shifting our conversation around mental health. This is an idea? It's really based on the work of a woman named Julia Ross, who wrote a book called The Mood Cure, and she described how we have real moods. That's when something happens and we're in a mood as a result, and then we have our false moods when we're suddenly out of nowhere anxious, irritable, angry, sad, and our brain is always all too happy to swoop in with a narrative to tell us, well, I'm feeling anxious because I got that email from my boss and he seems angry. Maybe I'm underperforming. Maybe I'm going to lose my job. Maybe we're going to be starving. And so our brain, it's a meaning maker. It's happy to swoop in and make sense of our physical sensations. But if we could really omnisciently know what was happening in the body in that moment, it was never about the email from the boss. We're anxious in that moment because something in our physical body got out of balance, tripped us into a stress response. And that stress response impacts the brain directly, and it makes us feel anxious. In many ways, a stress response feels identical to anxiety or even panic. And with false anxiety, the key is that it's a physical state. Something was off in the body, a blood sugar crash, or we were sleep deprived, or we're hungover, or we're over caffeinated, or our gut is off, we're maybe inflamed in our digestive tract, or a number of other possible causes. And it's this physical state of imbalance that's causing what we experience as a mental health issue. And that's what we call it, and that's how we treat it. But there's actually a straightforward path out by getting the physical body back into balance. I'll point out, I don't call it false anxiety to invalidate the very real suffering that this causes. This causes untold amounts of unnecessary suffering around the world. But I call it false because there is a physical basis, not a mental basis. And there's a straightforward path out of those symptoms.
So how can someone kind of tell the difference between like a true anxiety? And can you just explain then what a true anxiety is? Like, and how can someone tell the difference between a true and a false anxiety?
Yeah. So if false anxiety is avoidable anxiety, it's physically based anxiety. True anxiety is not something based in the physical body. It's not something that we can decaf coffee or gluten free our way out of. And it's not really something we should be pathologizing either. It's our inner compass, it's really our true north. And it's here with a call to action. It's nudging us to say, you're feeling uneasy because you need to slow down, get still, and pay attention. Something is not right in your personal life, in your community, in the world at large. And you have a unique vantage point on this, a unique perspective, perhaps a unique offering that you can contribute to this problem. And it's basically a call to action. It's saying, you know that there's something here that you need to do. And sometimes it gently, lovingly nudges us and whispers, like, you need to take care of this. Sometimes it shouts at us. It can like
Mhm.
paralyze us in our lives or cause panic. But either way, it's basically saying there's something here. There's an inconvenient truth that you've been ignoring that it's time for you to listen to and act upon. So it's really a purposeful anxiety. And when we translate that anxious feeling into purposeful action, we don't feel so uncomfortably anxious anymore. And we feel engaged with purpose and we feel motivated.
Now, when I think of my own community, when I think about true and false anxiety, I feel like a large number of people are dealing with false anxiety, just based on the number of health issues that I see. Um, in your own practice, do you see one more than the other? Do you treat one more than the other, or do you find that it's often a mix of the true and the false anxiety?
It's often a mix. And I guess this speaks to the part of your question I didn't answer before, which is discerning the difference between the
Mm.
two. And what I usually do is I start with false anxiety. That's the low hanging fruit, it's the quick wins. So if someone comes into my office and I have a sinking suspicion that there might be some true anxiety, like maybe they're in the wrong relationship, in the wrong career, maybe they need to be spending more time with their grandma, whatever is their true anxiety, I don't attack that first. First, it's okay. So you're unnecessarily suffering in a variety of ways. Let's get your sleep on track. Let's nourish your body a bit. Let's maybe decrease some inflammation, get you pooping regularly, keep your blood sugar stable, maybe make some very uncomfortable choices around alcohol and caffeine. Nobody likes that conversation, but it makes a big difference. And so once we've got a lot of that avoidable anxiety out of the way, it clears the air a bit and it makes it a lot easier to approach the true anxiety and to recognize it for what it is. And so then someone has more of a baseline state of calm that they can access, a little bit more clarity. And then you can face the dragon of, okay, so you know that you're in the wrong relationship. And it's really freaking scary to face that reality because your life is built around this person, because you worry about repercussions. You don't want to hurt them. You don't want them to be angry at you. You don't want to lose the friends involved. You don't want to lose the security involved. You don't want to be stranded and alone. And I think that there's just all these fears that we have, but we still have that inner knowing this is the wrong relationship. That's our true anxiety. And that's where we have to kind of just settle in and say, okay, we cannot ignore this truth any longer, even though it's terrifying.
Well, I think that's really fascinating how you work with your patients, and it just makes so much. You kind of like, it's almost like, I don't know, I just kept envisioning like you clean the slate of all that stuff first, like help them get their blood sugar balanced, you know, getting the refined sugars out of their diet, helping them sleep better. And then if they're still feeling very, very anxious, what you're really dealing with. Do you ever find that do you have patients where it's just all that stuff? It's just all the false anxieties, and then once you clear that up, then they feel good. How often does that happen?
I'll say this. I mean, I think we are all a jumble of physical imbalance and psychospiritual blockages. And, few among us are perfectly psychospiritually in alignment in our lives. But sometimes dealing with the false anxieties is enough. I remember
Mhm.
one patient in particular, she came in with her mom. She was young, and she was really suffering. It was so apparent, even as she walked into my office, she was visibly inflamed. Um, she had malar rash on her skin. She looked sort of puffy and edematous, like she was retaining water. And she was so uncomfortable. And she was like, she couldn't have healthy bowel movements. Her skin was always erupting into different rashes. Her anxiety was off the charts. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't focus. And with this woman, it was honestly 2 sessions. And it was like, okay, like, let's think about likely culprits, what you might be eating that might be inflaming you. Let's get your digestion back on track. We did that in 2 sessions, and she just flew like a bird out of the nest. She was just fine. And she was like, thanks, doc. See you later. And, that woman might have some psychospiritual um, blockages in her life, but it didn't really feel like, it's always a question of how much are you suffering? And if it's causing suffering, let's roll up our sleeves and dig in. But if you're just happy and you're feeling sufficiently fulfilled in your life, then, we can call this a just false anxiety case and close the case. And so sometimes it is like that. And sometimes it's actually, I'll have patients who are, they really got the memo about holistic health. They've been doing all of the physical health practices, sometimes for years before they walk through my door. And then when I see them, I can tell it's really around the psychospiritual. They're eating perfectly, they're detoxifying, their digestion is great, their sleep is great, they're doing everything right. And they're really suffering. And often then I'll realize that trauma plays a role. Sometimes it's some huge, major contemporaneous state of imbalance psychospiritually, but usually it's trauma. And then it's an entirely different approach. And in a way, sometimes all of that effort we can put in to being in a state of physical health, it can even be a distraction. It can sometimes be its own source of anxiety, and people can get kind of obsessive about it
For
or
sure.
fixated on eating right, like orthorexia. And so sometimes I'm encouraging people to loosen the reins a bit on keeping their physical health in balance and make space for a much softer approach to the psychospiritual and the sort of trauma underpinnings of their suffering.
And what I'm hearing as well as what makes you really different again is that you really listen to your patient and what's going on with them and what they need and get to know them so that you know when you can identify someone who is like super rigid with their diet already. So recommending someone like that do, XYZ may set them off even further. And do you think do sometimes true anxieties cause the false anxieties? Like, right? Like
Great
trauma
question.
leading to eating a certain way. Do you see that often?
I love that question. I think that there's like a surface level answer and then a really deep level answer to that. On a surface level, absolutely. Like if we have trauma, if we're psychospiritually out of alignment, like when I was out of alignment in my life in a variety of different ways, I was binge eating. And, I was binge eating for a number of different reasons. Some of them almost a physical addiction to processed foods, but some of them my deep loneliness and feeling of being misaligned. And and so I think absolutely whenever we have an unaddressed true anxiety, it can drive us to do certain behaviors that then get our physical health more out of balance. But I think there's also this even more sort of subtle or rarefied way of thinking about the ways our physical body gets out of balance. I think there's often a psycho-spiritual message almost to where and how we get out of balance. And try to think of like a really simple example, but like I'll have a patient with heart issues, and heart issues, are not to be handled lightly. I don't just like get somebody gluten free to deal with heart issues. We work with a cardiologist, all of that. But you can sometimes unpack that and realize like there was a moment in their life where there was
Mm,
something tragic that really broke their heart. And it's sort of always both. Like this has a physical basis, it's genetic, there's family history, there's what was going on in their physical health, but then there's often a psycho-spiritual underpinning to the ways our bodies break down.
So let's talk about some of the ways in which you help people with their false anxieties, that low hanging fruit. I'd love to talk about, for example, are there, from a nutritional perspective, are there certain foods that you've seen in your practice do contribute to anxiety? And then what are your recommendations to help support your patients?
Yeah. So this is the whole first half of my book. Is like all of the Mr.
Yep.
Fix-It actionable strategies for dealing with false anxiety. Sleep is a big one. I love starting with sleep
Hmm.
because people don't necessarily want to get off of coffee or gluten, but everybody wants to sleep well, and so
Yes.
that's a nice place to start. And there's a lot of actionable strategies we can do to support sleep. I really believe that for most of us, the ways that we're not getting adequate quantity or quality of sleep has to do with these aspects of modern life that disrupt our circadian rhythm. So, something as simple as not bringing the phone into the bedroom at night or wearing blue blocking glasses after sunset can go a long way to supporting a healthy circadian rhythm, making sure we're releasing melatonin at bedtime, and improving our sleep quality. And then I do focus on digestive health quite a bit. There's such a
Hmm.
two-way street between our brain and our
Totally.
gut. And when our gut is not happy, that sends information up to our brain and it tells us to feel anxious. And so, it's a nice entry point. Basically, heal the gut, and we just automatically feel less anxious for a number of different reasons. Part of it is the communication up to the brain. Part of it is that our gut is also where we manufacture a lot of our neurotransmitters. Serotonin, certainly, which people are familiar with, but also GABA, which is involved with anxiety. And then I do focus a lot on nutrition. Let's say that the sort of overarching idea with nutrition is that a lot of anxiety can be caused from being undernourished. And a lot of us in the Western world, we're perfectly well fed. Many of us are even overfed, but we're still
Hmm.
undernourished. And it's partly because of our processed food industry and our nutrient depleted soil. And so it's really hard to be adequately nourished in all the scavenger hunt of nutrients, vitamins, and minerals that we need. And so I encourage people to start to eat a really balanced diet, more nutrient dense foods, to make sure that they're generally trying to err on the side of eating real food and avoiding fake food or processed food. But there are some likely culprits of foods that can exacerbate our mental health. And it's different for all of us. For many people, it's worth taking a look at things like gluten and dairy. For some people, sugar is a big factor with anxiety. And under the radar ones are things like industrially processed vegetable oils, which I'm sure your audience is familiar with. But the average patient who comes into my office is sometimes like, "What? I thought vegetable oils were healthy." And so sometimes there's some rehabilitation to do there. But then I'm always really careful that in one breath, I'm saying, okay, you might want to eliminate these foods. You might want to add in more nutrient dense foods, maybe more organ meats, maybe more red meat, maybe more vegetables or healthy fats. But in the next breath, I always want to follow that with, and we want to do all of this while retaining a sense of ease and pleasure around food and not become obsessive or fearful or feel fragile about food. And that's a very delicate balance to strike, especially in the modern food landscape. But so there's a lot of work we can do to nourish our bodies to feel less anxious, but we need to do it without becoming fixated on it and letting it be a part time job that takes over our life.
Yeah. How do you handle with very type A people that you're working with? I imagine because they're like must do everything absolutely perfect, but they barely know how to boil water. What strategies do you give people?
And you're basically describing me there. So I think that I think a lot about Gretchen Rubin's. I don't know if you're familiar with her work,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
she has these sort of types, and that person is the upholder. And
Right.
the upholder, it's like if I say jump, they'll be like, how high? And I have to be careful with those folks
Hmm.
because I tell people to jump in a lot of ways. And I've learned the hard way that over the years, I've had some upholders that were just jumping and it took over their life. And
Right.
so I have to, I almost do the opposite of what somebody is. Like if someone's a rebel, then I'm like, no problem. Don't worry. Go eat crap. It's fine. And I'm sort of playing the long game and subtly over many months or even years, getting them to transform their diet from a motivational interviewing place. Like it's almost like it's their idea and not something I'm telling them to do because it'll just backfire if I tell them what to do. But with upholders, it's the opposite. And I'm really thinking about like how to help them cultivate an attitude of listening to their body. That it's not just here's the perfect way to execute on this. Let me do everything at 150%, but it's starting to change the way we talk to ourselves. You show up, you do your reasonable best, something that's sustainable and that's good enough, and how to listen to their own body's limitations. When is their energy limit getting, encroached upon? And so how they kind of listen to, I want to compulsively do everything so right, but I'm also getting burned out in the process. So how do I listen for that boundary and start to ease off before I steamroll over that boundary and get completely burned out?
I think that's so great that you kind of recognize what personality type they are and then kind of adjust your recommendations accordingly. I've always said, as a nutritionist, that I believe that learning how to cook is a life skill that we should all learn. And I always, I don't have a practice anymore. I don't see clients one on one anymore. But I always, whenever I would have someone come to me and be like, I hate cooking. I don't like it. It's just, and those, I have to be honest, those were always hardest people to work with because I had to teach them how to fall in love with food and look at food differently. And I've always said, and that's, one thing we do with our daughter, Vienna, she's always involved in the food process because I want her to be able to know, how to whip up a healthy meal in 15 minutes flat when she's, 21 and living on her own. So how do you find that challenging sometimes with people who are just not willing to embrace? I mean, I guess this is my opinion that I feel like everyone needs to embrace food, learn how to cook, because if you want to heal your body, that's such a hugely important aspect is food. So how do you kind of navigate that with people who are just so like, I guess it's sometimes those type A people who are just like, just give me the meal plan. Just, I'll sign up. I mean, if they have the means, the financial means, I guess if you can sign up for a meal delivery, that's a good option for those type of people.
Yeah. Oh, so it's funny. I haven't actually talked about this in an interview yet. And so we're
Oh,
going to sort of, let me sort of wade my way through this. And there's like touches of hypocrisy here. So I think that one of the most important things that we can do, I completely agree with you, is learn to cook for ourselves. And homemade food is such a all around win-win. It's better for the planet. It's better for our bodies. It's better for our budgets. It's this act of self-love. It slows things down. It makes us more mindful of our food. And we tend to make better choices in terms of where we spend our money on usually, smaller farms, more humane animal husbandry than when we're eating out. That's going to be usually food from a concentrated animal feeding operation and less humane animal husbandry. And I think that I stand by this so firmly. And yet I'm a lousy cook. And
I bet you're not.
oh, ask anybody. And but the thing is that one solution is you can be in a household with somebody who can cook.
Yes.
That sometimes is a
Let
really
them
nice
do it.
option. But I think I am so committed to being a realist with my patients. And, it would be so hypocritical if someone said to me like, okay, I want to eat well, but I can't cook. And who am I to say like, you're better? So I think that I'm really interested in helping people figure out workarounds. And whether it is a meal delivery service, whether it is like, sometimes I can convince people to batch cook, like once a week, cook a large volume of food, pack it up in Tupperware. And then they've saved sufficient money that week that they can order better quality takeout later on in the week. And so there are different ways to make sure we're nourishing our bodies. And I don't make it a requirement that people cook because I couldn't possibly impose that on others when I'm not doing it for myself. But it is really wonderful when people can. I really like that you're involving your daughter in the kitchen. It's such a great skill. I think back to my childhood and it felt like almost a feminist choice for me to not learn how to cook.
Yeah.
And that was a big mistake. And it turns out that no, being able to nourish yourself is not sort of falling in with the patriarchy. It's really just a beautiful act of self-love that every human ideally knows how to do. So yeah, I let my husband teach my daughter how to cook.
That's amazing. Well, I always say, you know what, just start it with one recipe a week. Cause I think especially like one new recipe that you've never tried, because what I've seen with people over the years is that for the people who are very unsure about cooking and think they're a terrible cook, it's just they need like one good recipe and that gives them confidence. And they're like, wow, I made this amazing chili and I made that. So I don't know, I always find with people, if you just say, okay, just try one recipe, just try one. I feel that if you can read, you can cook. I'm going to send you a copy of one of my cookbooks.
I'm so lucky.
Maybe it will end up in your husband's hands. I'm okay with that.
I will give this a try. You're absolutely right. And I think back to a few years back, I had one recipe for a beef stew that I would make in the Instant Pot. And the feeling of self-efficacy when I would cook that for my family and nourish us with it. I was in the habit back then. I've just fallen so out of the habit. And it is the only thing I know how to make. So that
sounds delicious. But again, because you have a partner who can cook, then, well, that's great. That's the way to do it. So with my partner, he cooks as well, which is nice. So it's kind of like sometimes I cook because he wants to work out and we kind of like switch it up. But he always cleans and I'm okay with that. He's just like, Joy, leave the kitchen. Just let me do it. And I have no guilt because I don't like cleaning. So the kitchen in particular, I like vacuuming, but when it comes to the kitchen, I just let him do that. And I'm totally okay with that. And now for a short break. You learned about the amazing benefits of our Rise and Shine and Rejuvenate teas already, but I'm such a tea lover, you know I couldn't stop at just 2 blends. Now I want to introduce you to 2 of our brand new teas and one of our bestsellers. You know I'm a big fan of natural skin and beauty care, which is why I want to go even deeper to give you a tea that supports your beauty from the inside out. Our Radiance tea is loaded with skin-loving ingredients like rose petals, nettles, moringa, and lavender. Radiance tea is light and earthy. It's an herbal green tea blend that will have you glowing from the inside out. And it also contains some organic green tea and white tea for extra beautifying antioxidants, which means it also has a light hit of caffeine. This fresh tea has a subtle floral taste thanks to the rose and lavender that is perfectly complemented by the light and earthy notes of green tea. Every cup will help strengthen and protect skin cells while it nourishes the gut and supports healthy digestion for glowing skin from head to toe. It's the perfect tasty way to stay hydrated and get your glow on with every sip. Now, when it comes to health, soothing stress and anxiety plays a crucial role, which is why I wanted to create a tea that supports your nervous system from morning to night. Our new TLC tea is packed with a blend of organic herbs like lemon balm, chamomile, passion flower, and lavender that have all been specially chosen to nourish and soothe your nervous system so you can feel relaxed and calm any time of day. Beautiful passion flower supports the production of GABA to help calm racing thoughts and promote rest and relaxation. It's also a great tea for people who struggle with stress and anxiety, since chamomile, lavender, and lemon balm can help boost your natural resilience and reduce anxiety, which is why I literally drink it every single night before bed. It has a beautiful, subtle, honey sweet and floral flavor thanks to the chamomile, lavender, and passion flower that is perfectly balanced with a hint of freshness from the lemon balm. So pour yourself a tender, loving cuppa at the end of a long day to help your body and soul relax and unwind so you can drift off to dreamland for deep and healing rest. Did you catch that? Tender, loving cuppa? That's why we called it TLC. And finally, let's not forget my super gentle Joyous Detox tea, which is a soothing and detoxifying caffeine-free tea as well. It's made with pure organic ingredients that support your body's natural detoxification system to keep you feeling joyous all year long. There's no need to rely on strict detoxes or harsh diets when you can support your body with Joyous Detox, a tea that's so gentle and naturally detoxifying that it's safe for daily drinking. Sip up all the detoxifying properties this tea has to offer, from liver-supporting organic milk thistle to organic dandelion root and immune-balancing organic elderberries. You'll especially love the fresh spice of ginger combined with the bright citrus notes from the orange oil. To check out all of our teas, visit shopjoyoushealth.com/herbal-tea. You can even enjoy 10% off your next tea purchase by entering JHPTEA when you check out. Now back to our guest. So in your book, obviously you talk about a lot more than nutrition. And we touched on some of those kinds of things. You talked about sleep, for example. I just had one more question about sleep because I think you gave some good suggestions of like how to get a better sleep. But why is it that not getting enough sleep? What's going on there when we don't get enough sleep? Why do we feel more anxious?
I bet there are 50 reasons, and what's currently established in the scientific literature is just the tip of the iceberg. But one
Yeah.
thing that we know is that, so if you remember back to high school biology, we have our lymphatic system, and that's that series of vessels and channels in our body that help us detoxify waste. It clears waste from the body, sending it to the sweat glands or to the kidneys to be excreted in the urine. And the brain also, for the longest time, we thought it didn't have a lymphatic system, and that was crazy bananas. The brain, of
Mhm.
course, has a lymphatic system. It has its own system. It's called the glymphatic system because it's kind of modulated by cells called the glial cells. And that whole system does its job at night while we sleep. So basically, the same residues that we know of from Alzheimer's disease,
Mhm.
basically the deposits that can get lodged in our brain, that's part of what gets cleared out by the lymphatic system. And if we're not clearing that out every night, we have buildup. We haven't actually established that connection. Like, does less sleep over time directly cause is that causal of Alzheimer's disease? It's not yet known. I suspect it plays a role. But basically, when we're not clearing everything out every night, the next day we're trying to function with a brain that effectively it's like a city with all the garbage bags still piled up in the alleyways. They haven't been cleared
Right.
out by the garbage trucks. So we're fuzzier, we're tired, we are less coordinated, we're less clear, we're less patient, we have compromised ability to have good executive function, like making good decisions, being resourceful, having restraint. And so all of this is impacted by our sleep. And that's just one aspect of how sleep protects our brain function during the day.
Incredible. And is there, in terms of having that sort of toxic cleanup when you're sleeping, is this something that happens in a certain stage of sleep, or is it just kind of like you need 7 to 9 hours sleep? Or is it something that happens, say, in deep sleep or REM sleep? Or is it just like, just make sure you get 7 to 9 hours of sleep and your lymphatic system or your glymphatic system should do its job?
I suspect that is known. It's not something I know which phase of sleep our lymphatic system is most active. But all of the different stages of sleep serve a role in terms of our brain function. And REM sleep, for example, is this time when we're really having a lot of consolidation of memories from the day, and we are making sense of the events of the day. Like, it's our unconscious kind of trying to process what we've gone through. So each and every stage of sleep is essential to healthy brain function. And what we really want is consistent, good sleep architecture night after night. And it's hard to achieve in modern life. I'll
Hmm.
be the first to admit that. But, what we talked about before with preventing blue light from disrupting our circadian rhythm is really helpful. But there's probably also something to be said for earlier bedtime, which is not
Yes.
everyone's favorite
Oh,
advice,
I
but
love going to bed early.
sometimes it's people's favorite advice.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
basically, like 3 hours after sunset is a really good sweet spot for human sleep.
Oh, I like that. That's a good recommendation. 3 hours after sunset. Well, I feel like I fall asleep even earlier than that sometimes.
Or earlier is okay.
I guess it depends on the time of year.
Exactly. It varies with the time of year and where you are on the globe, which makes sense. And so, but basically, the sun sets, you maybe eat, socialize a little bit, do the logistics for rounding up your day, and then off to sleep. And the body functions really well when we sync up our sleep with, for lack of a less hippie way of saying it, the sun and the moon.
Yeah, totally. Well, I think about back when I was a kid and we spent all our summers going camping all through like Northern Ontario. My parents, we didn't fly all over the world. We literally just like went camping. My dad was a teacher, so he had like the 2 months off, and then my mom would take a vacation as well. But we would always go camping, and I just remember always like you wake up with the birds. You wake up at like 5:30, 6 a.m., and you're literally like ready to fall asleep at 8:39 because
Yeah.
the sun has gone down, and it just feels so good. And I can totally relate to what you're saying, when you don't get enough sleep, how you feel. But for me, I find that lack of sleep doesn't cause anxiety. But when I don't sleep enough, that is when I crave sugars, which do make me feel anxious. So that's when I'm, if I'm walking past a Starbucks, I'm like, oh yeah, remember that like gigantic chocolate chip cookie that I used to get back in the day all the time with my, who knows what, vanilla sugar-free, non-fat latte. That's what I would always be craving. And then it would give me anxiety. So I can totally, relate to that. Are there any sort of off the top of your head, any other lifestyle factors that you can think of that you want to share with everyone that are really important to help better manage anxiety?
Yeah, I think that's such a great point you make about it's when we don't get good sleep that we start craving. We leptin and ghrelin are the hormones that kind of determine our ability to feel satiety after a meal or continue to be hungry, which is ghrelin. And when we don't sleep, we are in a ghrelin predominant state where it's like, nope, we just need to eat for fuel.
Yeah, cookie monster.
Yeah, that's also my sweet spot. So, or I guess soft spot. But
Yeah.
So I think that inflammation is a big thing to consider. And when we are inflamed, the circulating inflammatory molecules called cytokines directly impact a part of the brain that's involved with threat detection. And so we feel under threat and we don't feel at ease. And in fact, we feel more anxious, we feel more tired, a feeling of malaise. And a lot of us are just in this state chronically throughout our lives. And it's not entirely because life is defeating us, but often it is because we're just in a chronic low grade state of inflammation. So whenever we can deal with recalibrating our immune system, it starts in the gut, making sure we have a healthy gut with a diverse ecosystem of beneficial bacteria, a healthy gut lining, that we're not eating something that's constantly inflaming our gut. But then recalibrating the immune system, I think, is an imperative in modern life. We're really out of balance from an immunologic perspective. And I see this through an ancestral lens, but I think we evolved getting much more sunshine. We had healthier vitamin D levels, and we had much more exposure to a diverse array of microbes. And we even got sick in useful ways. And it's awkward to talk about this in just the end of a pandemic because some viruses really are nasty and you don't want them if you can avoid it. But to a certain extent, in childhood especially, being exposed to a variety of not particularly virulent pathogens is helpful in training our immune system and making sure we recognize a lot of different pathogens, and it calibrates our immune system so that we're not attacking self tissue, which is autoimmune disease, or overreacting to benign stimuli as we do with allergies. And you really want to calibrate your immune system to recognize friend from foe. And so I think in modern life, we need to really address inflammation. And then I think beyond that, community. I don't know if that's a lifestyle factor, but everything else I say in the book, like if you had to just swipe it all to the side in order to prioritize connecting with the people that you love, I would say that that's the best medicine for anxiety. And we feel safe and calm when we feel held in community. This pertains to our evolutionary origins. We were not the fastest or the strongest species of the savannah. We were just the ones that figured out how to cooperate. And for that reason, we're social creatures. Even if we're introverted, we're social creatures. And when we feel part of the group, we feel safe. And when we feel isolated or ostracized, we feel anxious. And so the more we can build community back into our lives and make sure that we are showing our full selves, feeling seen, and feeling a sense of belonging, that's deeply therapeutic to our nervous systems.
Absolutely. You've brought up so many important points. So I'm just going to recommend that everyone get your book. We will make sure that we link it up in the show notes because there's so much wonderful information. And also for people to check you out on Instagram as well, on social, because you share a lot of wonderful information that's very digestible and things that you can do right away. So I really appreciate that. Are there any sort of final thoughts, anything you want to share that you feel we kind of missed or didn't touch on?
We didn't touch on parenting.
Yes, let's talk about that. Yes, we're going to talk about
that.
Yeah, no, but we can definitely talk about that. Yeah, I'm curious actually. So, well, I have a question for you, but if you just want to jump in.
I'm curious to hear what you want to ask about.
Yeah, I'm curious, being a mom, we're both moms here and we have daughters the same age. Have you come across, how have you dealt with your daughter? Has your daughter experienced anxiety, and how as a parent have you helped her through that?
Yeah, I don't think anxiety per se. I think that she's experienced the full catastrophe of life and,
Yeah.
like it shows up in many different moods. Um, there's a lot that I do really intentionally with my daughter. I think in the false anxiety sense of the word, it's big in our household, helping us all identify our false mood states. So she knows when she's hungry that she's
Yeah.
irritable. She's not
Hangry.
happy about that knowledge. Yeah, because in the
Kids,
moment
I
she's
feel does any child not get hangry? My daughter definitely gets hangry. And I'm like, or like tired, the tiredness, right? If they're tired, if
tiredness.
they're moody, it's like, oh, you're tired.
Yeah, and it's a tricky thing. So we've at least come to the point where she can embrace her own hangriness. Like she gets it, she
Oh, good.
understands. And the tired thing, like no irritable tired person wants to be told they're irritable because
This
they're
is true.
tired, including 6-year-olds. So so it's more like my husband and I murmuring, like, oh, she's tired.
Yes,
That's why she's a
exactly.
monster right now. So it just helps us understand why is everything a disaster. And it helps us prioritize keeping her physiology stable. We really don't mess around with her sleep, with her blood sugar. We really pay a lot of attention to giving her like cod liver oil in the winter and avoiding inflammatory foods when possible without altering, her experience of having a normal childhood, which is a tough balance. I think that there's also there's these are anxious times that we're living through, and parents are so anxious.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure if I have something deep or profound or new to say about this, but it's certainly been my instinct as a parent is to not let her absorb all that cultural anxiety. I want as much as possible in 2022 in a pandemic in a place like Manhattan, I want her to feel like that expansive, calm experience of childhood as much as possible. And so I try not to rush with her. I'm careful not to be like, I'm so stressed or I'm so
Mm-hmm.
overwhelmed. I really try to like let her see a version of the world that's calm and that we're okay. And I really also don't ever want to be inauthentic. I think that's messed up. And it's like kids always know they're
Oh,
sophisticated
yeah,
social creatures.
totally.
If you're feeling awful, but you're slapping on a smile, like that's just gaslighting them and they feel like something about my felt sense is not consistent with what the adults are telling me. That's upsetting.
100%.
But I think that I try to actually really be it and to actually not just when I'm with her, I slow down and I put my worries aside so that I can just feel okay and let her know that she's okay.
You seem like a very calm person. You have like a very calm energy about you. I don't know if that's the yoga or that's just innately who you are, or maybe inside you're losing it. No, I'm kidding.
I think I have a very sensitive nervous system. So I've
Yeah.
had to figure out how to self regulate. I co regulate with other people. I think I just do that naturally at this point.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm really, really just trying to keep my own nervous system in a calm state all the time because I'm sensitive. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like, a car honks its horn outside my window and I get a little stress response from it. So I'm
Yeah,
always
me too.
trying to slow down and breathe.
I have one more question about parenting. This is definitely a personal one.
Mm.
I find since becoming a parent, I definitely, it depends on the time of the month too. So I know it's related to my hormones, but it's just like that worrying, that like incessant, ridiculous worrying at night when you go to bed. And I talk to other parents, other moms, especially. I don't hear the dads say this as much. Definitely not my husband. I don't think he has an anxious bone in his body. But a lot of my mom friends tell me, yeah, like it's just that anxiety, like worrying that, making sure when your child crosses the street, they look both ways. Is this like just something that happens to every mom? Or is this something I can get a better grip on? Because I do find that sometimes, certain times of the month, I'm like, okay, Joy, get a grip. Everything's going to be okay.
I think the survival of our species hinges on the fact that when we're pregnant, there's this gyrus in our brain that's devoted to worrying about the safety of our children, and it grows and enlarges, and it only gets bigger as our children are out in the world. And so, no, I think that it's really natural and normal. And I don't think there's fully any way around it. But I do think that as we are in the late luteal phase in our cycle, it's so important to recognize like we're just more tender, like our nerves are more tender. And I really like a cultural reframe around that. Like, we're not necessarily wrong. We don't have to pathologize what gets to us in our luteal phase. Our culture tells us, we're being irritable, we're being bitchy. But I think we have a lower tolerance for BS. And I think we're really tender. And sometimes it's about stuff that is very real. And so, can we give ourselves that grace and then also prioritize having an Epsom salt bath and an early bedtime? And I think there just is this exquisite vulnerability of having children, and there's absolutely no way around it. And we all have to find our own dynamic with that. Like, I've thought a lot about, especially since losing my own mom, what my worldview is around loss. And thank you. And so it's like I've had to really come to decide that for me, what feels right, what feels good, is that there's more to this existence than what we can comprehend and what's immediately materially apparent. And that gives me comfort. It doesn't mean I don't feel incredible vulnerability having my whole heart outside of my body walking around in the streets of New York City.
It's a good description.
But it does just help me be in dynamic with the unfoldings of my life and when things are challenging and when things feel vulnerable. And I just decide I'm here for the full, exquisite human experience. And my favorite line for this is the quote I opened the last chapter of my book with. It's trust in Allah, but tie your camel. And for me, that conveys the balance of you do your best to stay safe, to keep the people you love safe. And then at a certain point, we actually have to let go and trust.
Yeah. I love your perspective. Just especially the spiritual aspect, bringing that in and, having that knowing that it's not just here in our flesh body, right? That we're so much more than that. So I really appreciate that. You are a true healer. That is how I would describe you. So thank you so much for all your gifts that you're bringing to the world. And where can people find you and connect with you?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to learn this approach to mental health is in my book, The Anatomy of Anxiety, which is available wherever books are sold. And, try to use your money to support good causes with where you buy books. And then I'm pretty active on Instagram. I'm at Ellen Vora, MD.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Ellen. I really appreciate it.
Joy, thank you so much for having me.